You're listening to Psych with Mike. For more episodes or to connect with the show with comments, ideas, or to be a guest, go to www.psychwithmike.com. Follow the show on Twitter @PsychWithMike or like the Facebook page @PsychWithMike. Now, here's Psych with Mike.
This is Dr. Michael Mahan. Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. I'm here with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing extremely well.
Yeah.
More better.
More better and more better?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. So I just wanted to tell everybody to go to michaelmahan.org, which is my new revamped website that I've been pimping on this show, and tell me what you think about it, and let me know if there's things you like, if there's anything you don't like.
See, you make a good pimp.
Well, you're the one with the line. You too can.
No, that was Eddie Murphy.
Yeah.
I stole that. Yeah.
But you have repeated it many times.
If it's a truism.
It is a truism.
That's how truisms become truisms.
Exactly. Comedy has to have some kernel of truth in it, or it wouldn't be funny, right?
Freud says it has to be aggressive.
I don't know if I agree with that.
I think he's right. I think every joke that you can find has an object of the joke that suffers in some way.
Well, okay.
That's
so
what we laugh at.
If that's aggressive, then I would agree with that.
Incongruity. Yeah.
You know what? That would be a great show.
That'd be fun.
Humor.
Might be funny.
I'm writing it down.
Might not be funny. Neither one of us are particularly funny.
Well, but we could talk about the psychology.
Oh, as if we were?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
As if we knew.
Well, we do that all the time. How would that be different?
It wouldn't be different. You're the one who taught me that.
You know, you try to make me take responsibility for everything you know.
Well, you try and take responsibility for everything that I do, so I think that's
your wife.
I think that we're both right.
Okay.
So, how do you feel about Abraham Maslow?
I think the hierarchy of needs is an explanation that makes sense to me. I can see that. I like that he insisted that he thought the field of psychology was missing the boat because they were only focusing on the brokenness of people and what he called mental illness, and that we needed to look at the positive side and see the strengths and positive aspects of life that are offered to us if we just become aware of them and focus on them instead.
So would you say that would have been the beginning of positive psychology?
Yes.
Okay. I think that there would be a lot of people who would say that, yeah.
As if I would care.
What other people say?
Yeah.
But, my feeling about Abraham Maslow is that as a theoretician, he was more of a person who talked about exactly what you're saying. The things about psychology, the way it was being practiced that maybe weren't hitting the mark, more than he was telling us how to make it right.
Yeah. Well, we have to remember the time in which he worked, too. I mean, he was in the 1930s, 1940s. World War II was going on. The world was going to hell in a handbasket, and people were being really mean to each other in horrific ways that couldn't be hidden. So you look at the world and say, it's not a good place. Look at people and say, well, people aren't good.
And yet he was talking about transcendence and self-actualization during that period of time. So he saw something in humans even during that dark period that informed him that we were capable of more. And if there's anything that I really love about him, that would have been it.
Well, he did a lot of animal behavioral research when he was in school, and that was the hot thing because of Pavlov and the Russians. So he did a lot of conditioned response training and with animals, and in the doing of that, he said human beings have to have more, have to be more. It's not just that simple. And the explanation that he came up with for why there is more, why there are differences between the human being and the animal kingdom in terms of conditioned responses and rewards, is that human beings are capable of and have an innate drive toward self-actualization. So he says that each of us has within us the knowledge. I mean, we make the same argument today when we talk about rewarding children for performance behaviors. It's conditioned response. I'll give you $100 if you make an A. Teach them to work for a reward, like a pigeon, like Skinner and the pigeon flying the missile. Big reward at the end when you land.
Yeah.
So he said we're more than that, and we're more than that because there is within us an understanding of what is good for us or what we want to become, if we can break the restrictive patterns of our upbringing. So,
and both of us have lived most of our lives professionally as clinicians, and so we're sitting in a room with one or two or a handful at most of people who are talking about really horrible things and really, really debilitating pathology. And it's hard, at least for me, when I'm doing that for a living, to retain this idea of optimism and self-actualization.
I disagree with you on that.
Do you? Okay.
Yes, because what I see in the midst of that, listening to those horrible stories that people have to share, what I see is the incredible strength of the human spirit, the survival of the human being, and the content within that person that is greater than the pain they have suffered. And so I think to that degree I would agree with Maslow about focusing on the positives, because what I want to say to a person who suffered these despicable harms is to say, you know what, you survived. You got through it. Whatever it is in you that held you together, you got through it, and you're here today looking for, and hopefully we will find, a path forward so that you can leave that behind and have a different life. And your strength that you've already displayed by coming here tells me that you can make this journey. And so I never tired of saying that. I never tired of feeling that. I never became despairing because I was swimming in trash all day.
Yeah. Well, I don't think either one of us ever felt despairing or lost focus on
or
trying
burned out.
to.
I mean, just to say, oh, people are despicable, they're ugly, they're bad.
Right.
I don't think so.
Right. But I will say that there are times when I don't, where I lose sight of that North Star.
Well, you can develop compassion fatigue.
Yeah.
You can get weighed down by all of it. I mean, that's why it's important for you to have good boundaries, have your own therapy.
And have good self-care.
And have good self-care. Yeah. And people in your life that support you and embrace you.
I mean, we've been talking about do we go skiing, do we not go skiing this year, and all of that. And, it's just so important for people, if you do this for a living, if this is the choice that you make to pay your rent and feed your children, then you need to figure out how to be able to do it long term. And self-care is absolutely essential.
But one of the first ingredients of that is learning how to leave it at the office.
Yeah.
You can't take it home with you.
Yeah.
And that means you have to have good boundaries. If you don't have good boundaries, you're not going to survive.
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to go home. If you've been listening to horror stories of parental abuse all day, and you go home and you have two little children that are misbehaving, that are demanding, that are fragile, and you lash out at them, then you do a disservice to them and to you.
Certainly. Absolutely. Although I will say, if I had a nickel for every time that I thought to myself, this is what I would say to a client, and yet this is what I'm actively engaged in doing, I have a lot of nickels.
Well, I have a wife who would regularly point that out to me.
Yeah.
And she would very kindly say, what would you say to a client that just said what you just said to their child?
Yeah.
What would you say to a client that just did what you just did?
Right.
And I'd be like,
I'm not joking. I can remember many times. My kids are grown now and don't live with me, but when I would be at the office and thinking about how lucky I was and how I was going to come home and hug everybody and tell them how much I loved them.
Then you got home and somebody hadn't done the dishes. They had to put away their dirty laundry.
Yeah.
They wanted to watch something different on TV, and they didn't applaud when you came in the door.
Right.
Like, oh, Daddy's home.
Right. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
So, would you say that you feel self-actualized?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not that introspective. I look for patterns in others. I'm not as good at looking in the mirror for patterns. So I have my wife to help me do that.
Would she say that you are?
She says, "Oh, you always do that." No, she didn't say. She's incredibly supportive, so I would think so. But I don't. I'm not focused in that direction.
Yeah. So, would you?
I would say I'm happy.
Would you say that there is a thing as definable self-actualization, or do you think it's dependent on the individual?
Oh, I think it's totally experiential.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not an
so self-actualized for one person.
$100 million in my bank account works for me.
Yeah.
No, it probably doesn't.
And I would argue that
know.
money isn't.
Yeah. But so money or possessions, a new car. I mean, we can get focused on those and have pride in them and invest energy in them, but that's not my raison d'etre. That's not the reason that I function and live. I hope. If it is, then I'm too micro-focused. I need to raise my eyes.
So let's take our break and we'll come back and I'm going to ask you a question.
All right. One of the reasons that I want to participate in this show is because it gives me an opportunity to clinically review my understanding of what therapy is and how it works, especially for the consumer. So my hope is that we will find conversations that broaden my understanding of that.
And my hope is that we do that in a way that is useful but also entertaining for people, so that they want to listen, not only because they're getting good psychology information, but because they just enjoy the show.
Easy listening with an informational twist. So
that's a new tagline.
They're not sitting there going, huh?
Easy listening with an informational twist.
I'm really good at this. I'm a professional.
You're a professional. If it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike. Okay, we're back. And so the question I was going to ask is, do you think, because I really believe that self-actualization is experiential and is unique to the individual. What's self-actualized for one person would not necessarily be self-actualized for me. But I wonder, are there some foundational criteria that might be at least informational, like integrity? I think integrity.
Well, I don't disagree with you, and I don't mean to interrupt your thought process, but I was thinking Maslow said, there's an innate need, a drive towards self-actualization. He says it comes from within. He said an artist has to make art. A musician has to play music. So what does a truck driver have to do? What does a chef?
Grind those gears.
Yeah, so, most of us, again, going back to the hierarchy of needs, I have to make the rent somehow. Maybe I dig ditches. Maybe I sweep floors. So that you have to try to teach your children about the respectability of all work. Labor is its own reward to a given point.
Sure.
And we should respect that. So if a guy's a garbage truck driver, hopefully he can take some comfort and pride in doing the job well.
Right.
And receiving the pay for it.
I would hope so.
And hopefully we would respect him for that.
Right.
Because he's out there working. He's trying. He's trying to make it work, whatever that is.
Right.
But I don't know that I can put that together with Maslow's theory. Because I don't have a central identified theme in my life. I got to be a teacher. I got to be a therapist. I got to be an artist, a writer. Writers write. Yeah. Artists do. Okay. But what if you're a truck driver? What if you're a radio technician?
But I wonder if
you get your station on the air.
Maslow, if the impetus to do these things. I mean, so let's say that, so our skill sets are to do psychotherapy. So must we do psychotherapy to be self-actualized? I don't know whether or not that that to me is self-actualization.
So okay, what we're talking about is doing.
Yeah.
I think he would argue that what he was talking about is being.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you can be in a way and a place where you are happy, where you have joy, where you have positive, nurturing relationships, then you're probably self-actualized.
Right. And we've done podcasts on the difference between doing versus being. Eventually, I'd like to get to a point where we had a searchable database so that people could find podcasts.
Well, if you could just do that, then we could be there.
I am currently working on that.
Aha.
Yeah, but but just as a primer, just as a short kind of Reader's Digest condensed version of that, what's the difference between doing and being? Because I think it's essential that people understand that.
If I'm focused on doing, there is a goal to be reached, an outcome to be obtained, something to be accomplished, by which I take my definition of self-worth. So if I can make enough money, if I can win an election, if I can get a title or a promotion or a specific job, if I can get the house painted green, then I've done something. And when I've accomplished that, I can look in the mirror and say, damn, boy, you're good. You did what you set out to do. Being is not needing to accomplish a specific target for the value, but maybe because it makes you feel good.
Right.
Maybe because it's like, well, that's great, I did that. Now what?
Right.
And the ability to sit with yourself and with those with whom you have a relationship and be joyful and content and happy. And so I think you work on coming to know what is it that brings me joy, what brings me contentment, what brings me happiness. And if you try to maximize those realities in your life.
And I would even then add on to that, I think that this idea of being encompasses more than just being happy. I think being happy is one thing that can happen, but for me, integrity is really the core of that self-actualization process. And my kids will tell you, I've always defined integrity as doing the right thing, not because it's hard, or not even when it's hard, but because it's hard. And that having integrity is oftentimes very difficult. And that's what makes people not have integrity, because it's sometimes easier to not have it, right?
Yeah.
But you could go and do something that wasn't integral and be happy, and yet I think that would detract from an individual's sense of self-esteem and their self-actualization. So, and I'm not saying that integrity should be that or is that for other people, but I think that there are these things that exist, these ideas, these concepts that we would aspire to, that we would say these are higher concepts. And that those have a foundational part of self-actualization.
When I was in private practice,
Yeah.
I would talk to my clients regularly about the difference between the have-to shoulds and the choose-to shoulds. The have-to shoulds were the guilt-based and punishment-based messages that you were given in childhood. You have to go to school. You have to make A's. You have to go to college. You have to get a cross-country trucker's license, whatever it might be. It comes from someone else's agenda. Your parents, your community. You have to pay your taxes. A choose-to should is one that you select for yourself based out of your own sense of personal integrity. To be the person I want to be. When I look in the mirror, I want to be proud of me and happy about me and satisfied with me, not critical. I don't want that inner critical voice. So that requires me to say yes and no to different things.
Right.
So if I can say no to temptation or distraction and be the person I want to be, then I have integrity and I have freedom.
Right.
And I have responsibility, the ability to respond to circumstances.
Right.
if I just hear choose who shoulds, I have responsibility.
Yeah.
I am required to behave a certain way, or else I'll be punished. Something bad will happen.
And so there'd be two things that I would react to that. And the first one is that even if you don't get it right all the time, but you're making the effort, you're still making the effort, right? And so I think people can get hung up on, but I did this thing this one time. Yes, all of us are going to make mistakes. We're not all going to hit the bullseye 100% of the time. That's not what's required. You just have to want.
That reminds me of one of the lessons that we learned early on being therapists, because we worked with adolescents. Mm-hmm. And one of the philosophical debates about working with adolescents is, should the adolescent be required to pay some portion of the cost in some way? And many theorists would say, well, no, that's the responsibility of the parents or the system, because the system has identified this child as problematic and sent him to be fixed or her to be fixed. My approach to that was, they should, because they don't value it enough to deal with the pain of change. The fear of the unknown is awful. If I change, if I do something outside of the norms, awful things could happen. It could be a really bad thing. So it's better to just endure where I am and the suffering that I know how to survive than to take the risk of something new and the risk that brings of even greater harm or greater failure. Irrespective of whether it might also bring greater joy and pleasure and satisfaction, I would rather just sit where I am and be miserable because I know how to be miserable this way.
And that goes back to this recurring trope that we always go back to, of the patterns, right? And so we're comfortable with the pattern that we know, even if that is unhealthy and
painful.
Yeah, painful. So, and then the second thing that I would say is that if you're pursuing something as a doing thing, that even once you achieve it, it's hollow, because then what's next? And so if you're invested in doing, you can't ever win, because there's always going to be something more that you're going to have to pursue to be able to get that same right. So if I say, I want a new car, if I just had a new car, I'd be okay. And then I get the car, and for the first couple of weeks, it's great. But then if it gets a scratch, or after I've driven it for 6 months, and then I say, now I want that other car, there's no way to terminally be okay with that, because there's always got to be something else.
Right.
Yeah. And so we want to try and think about, in terms of each of us as individuals, what for us is that idea of being, whether it's, for me, integrity. And I don't know what you would say if you can wrap that up in a word or two, what that is. But I think each person would benefit, I shouldn't say need, would benefit from thinking about that a little bit and trying to answer that for themselves.
Love, happiness, the absence of fear and anxiety,
which is a huge one.
Yeah,
because
and I would say I don't do shame.
Yeah,
I do remorse. I feel bad if I've done something that is out of integrity for me, but I don't do shame, because I think shame is a control script that was written for me by someone else.
Well, it absolutely is.
Well, I think so.
But my caveat to love would be, it has to be unconditional love, though.
Oh, I don't think there is any such thing.
Well, but if you say, love, well, then there's this fear of, what happens if this person leaves me?
Yeah, fear of abandonment is one of the basic fears.
Yeah.
But you got to feel something in the meantime.
So you would say that it's okay for that to be a pursuit of self-actualization, even if there was the fear of abandonment that was associated with it?
Well, I think the fear of abandonment and loss are fundamental and drive a lot of our behaviors. But I don't think that
because the Buddhists would say
by those.
that is the root of all suffering, is the fear of loss, and so that's why you love without attachment because you don't want to be in a position where you have to fear losing it.
But the Buddhists want us to become non-human. If you don't ever desire
Editorial
anything,
note.
So what?
No, but
as I understand the philosophy, it is deny desire. Don't feel desire for anything in order to be at peace. Oneness.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I would say it's love without attachment, which I don't know how to do.
I think that exists.
I believe...
or it calls for a larger spirit than I can envision.
So my understanding of human biology is that we are coded at the level of DNA to be in attached relationships. And so I have difficulty being able to conceptualize that, which is why I don't practice Buddhism.
Maybe I should also volunteer that I'm not that particularly informed about Buddhist philosophy.
But, and maybe we should have somebody talk to us about Buddhism that would be more
They have to have the desire to come and explain.
Absolutely.
And be understood.
And hopefully they would
and then
be
gentle
liked
with us. And be human.
So I would say, for me, self-actualization, I would wrap up in the word integrity. And you would say that for you, self-actualization would be love.
No, you asked me for some few words, and they just keep popping into my head, like peace, love, affection, joy, positive emotions. I don't know that I can answer your question.
You couldn't boil it down
No.
to just one concept that you would.
No.
Okay. And so then if you...
But you know what? I'm really comfortable with that.
No.
It doesn't cause me any concern at all.
And
'cause I'm busy being here today.
Yeah. And so if there are those multiple concepts, then would you say that you could...
Cut the cards and deal.
But then you wouldn't be able to achieve it because you couldn't monitor...
It's not about achieving.
It's not about
doing.
It's about
experiencing. Yes.
Yeah. So hopefully that was educational for people, and if you want to get a hold of us, you can always...
And if it wasn't, just go out and do something.
Just go do something. You can get a hold of us through psychwithmike.com. If you want to follow us, you can follow us on Twitter @PsychWithMike, on Facebook @PsychWithMike. The music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And as always, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.